So we couldn't talk about art. We started with paintings and drawings, then we move on to poems, and now we're gonna move on to music, which is also so special in our lives. So our next speaker is Edward Christie, and he's gonna talk on, it's entitled Mozart's New Piano Sonata. Just to get a little background on Edward Christie, he's a native of New York and lives in Brooklyn with his wife and 2 children. He's classically trained pianist and received his degree in music from Brooklyn College. He has been a computer programmer for 30 years and taught data processing for 5 years at NYU School of Continuing Education. Edward was introduced to Spiritism over 15 years ago and has been studying it ever since. He has given lectures at various centers in the New York region, and this has given him an opportunity to combine his love of learning and teaching. So let's welcome Edward Christie.
Wolfgang Mozart's life was so eventful and filled with so many stories that it can be difficult to know where the myths end and the man begins. A child prodigy against which we measure every other prodigy. He wrote his first symphony at age 8 and had his first operatic success at 13. Was he divinely inspired? During his short life, he died at age 35. He suffered from many illnesses, witnessed the death of 4 of his 6 children, and endured long periods of financial want, and yet none of this is reflected in his music. Was he autistic, as some biographers suggest? He could write out a piece of music, actually he called it copying out. He could copy out a piece of music he had fully composed in his head while he drank punch and listened to his wife tell him funny stories. Was he some kind of freak of nature? His music has an otherworldly beauty to it that seems to exist in an alternate reality, a musical paradise. Perhaps he was an alien. These and other questions have generated much scholarly debate, but let's use this time to get to know, today, 224 years after his death, what the man and his music still has to say to us. In 1858 and 1859, the Spiritist Review recorded 3 conversations made with Mozart after evoking him. In one, the interviewer was interested in the discarnate spirit's understanding of itself, and questions concerning mediumship, what happens to the medium's body during communications, as well as the conditions, principles, and laws governing mediumship. Mozart confirms answers found in the recently published Spirits book, and that will be treated later in greater detail in the Medium's book. In another interview, the questions posed to Mozart vary, jumping from those about music to whether Mozart has seen the interviewer's parents, Mozart's understanding of God, eternity, and the universe, the interviewer's spiritual past and future, and what he can do to calm down. The third interview relates to our topic, a piano work that Mozart dictated to the medium Mr. Brian de Argaval, the composer of the opera Ivan the Terrible and the Swordbearers, which we know had at least one performance. This dictated piece was heard publicly at a session of the Parisian Society for Spiritist Studies. The pianist Miss D. Devan, a pupil of Chopin's, played a work of Mozart composed during his lifetime, followed by the newly composed sonata that Mozart dictated. These works were heard back to back, and those present confirmed the similarity of style shared by the 2 pieces. To reproduce what was heard at that meeting of the Society, let us listen to a short work Mozart composed a year before his death, followed by the newly composed work that he dictated to Mr. de Argaval. As we listen, pay attention to the effortless, song-like shape of the melody, how the sounds seem to float, and the beauty of the music, presented with elegance and emotional restraint. It's often said that Mozart's music is beautiful. Some go so far as to say his is the most beautiful music of any composer. Albert Einstein said, Mozart's music is so pure and beautiful that I see it as a reflection of the inner beauty of the universe itself. Peter Tchaikovsky said, Mozart is the highest, the culminating point that beauty has attained in the sphere of music. And Antonin Dvorak simply said, Mozart is sweet sunshine. What is beauty, and why do we respond to it? Three statements that we make about God are that God is all truth, all goodness, and all beauty. When we are present to God, we are present to truth, goodness, and beauty in our life. As Christians, the love we have for God and each other makes our lives beautiful. When we make room for God's love to live in our heart, we experience beauty. Not a sensible beauty that we see with the eyes, but an intelligible beauty that we see with the eyes of the heart. In our desire for beauty, we turn to the arts because the focus of art is on beauty. Art brings beauty into our life, and art makes our life beautiful. It is in the experience of beauty that man's dual nature is joined. Beauty reaches us through the senses, but it is not our senses that enjoy beauty. Rather, our senses perceive beauty, and our intelligence enjoys beauty. Art that unites our dual nature appeals to both our senses and our intelligence, and it is in the interplay of these two by which we experience beauty. Beauty that appeals only to our senses is prostitution, a vulgar use of beauty for the sake of profit. Advertising art falls into this category. Art that appeals only to our intellect has us asking questions such as, what is it? What does it mean? How does it work? Who's the artist? And maybe even for some modern works, how does it get away with it? These questions turn art into statements and facts that give us the pleasure of knowing. But knowing is not the pleasure you get from art, any more than knowing a list of facts about a person explains why you love him. We respond to art similar to the way we respond to another person. We experience the beauty of its being. Our initial perception or awareness of beauty is through the senses. The sight of a person's face, the touch of a baby's skin, the smell of a ripe fruit, the taste of something sweet, the sound of a human voice. These beauties are by their nature temporary. They come into existence and fade. Temporal beauty is where beauty begins, and our intelligence transforms our perception to reveal a deeper, more permanent beauty. This transformation tells us that temporal beauty is not the final word on beauty itself. We believe that God created all things, and therefore all things speak to us of God's beauty. Each being is beautiful because each has its origin in the beauty of God. The location of the beauty is both in the being itself and within us, since it would be impossible for us to experience beauty if we didn't have the ability to perceive it. Our capacity to see beauty is as large as our ability to respond to it. To develop our capacity to see beauty, we sharpen our senses through prayer and meditation, which quiets the mind and its internal chatter that deadens the senses, and train our intelligence by being mindful of what appeals to us, what we read, what we watch, what we listen to, as well as how we speak and what we speak of, so that we form a mind that's ready to take pleasure in higher forms of beauty. We are attracted to beauty because beauty holds out the promise of happiness. That if we could rest in what is beautiful and make it ours forever, that we'd be happy. Beauty promises happiness because it attracts us and gives us pleasure. God made us for his good pleasure and all of creation for us to enjoy. As God's children, then, we are intended to have pleasure in our life. St. Thomas Aquinas says, or points out rather, St. Thomas Aquinas points out that since it is impossible for us to live without pleasure, if we are deprived of spiritual pleasure that stimulates the intelligence and the heart, we'll find pleasure in the carnal. Therefore, if we're missing spiritual pleasure in our life, we'll be drawn to temporal pleasures that pass and fade. We're made to take pleasure in higher forms of beauty, and art can teach us to do this. The goal of art is to give us pleasure in the beautiful. The deeper purpose of art is to give us spiritual pleasure by awakening us to the beauty in the created world. Each art has its own way to give us pleasure in the beautiful. When a painting is hung on the wall, it changes the space in which it appears and makes it beautiful. Music, as a succession of sounds in time, make time itself beautiful. Music brings the awareness of time as a gift, one that's freely given for us to use. As one moment passes, another takes its place, and thus our lives are renewed in an endless stream of moments. Music gives us time ordered by sound and brings the awareness of the gift of time as fundamental to our experience of ourselves and of all of creation. We experience music in time. Unlike a painting that we can view in seconds, we can't absorb a piece of music by crushing it into one sound at a single moment. To hear music, we have to allow ourselves the time it takes for the sounds to unfold, and this deepens our sense of time. Our everyday experience of time is as of past, present, future, a ribbon of time stretching infinitely behind us and in front of us, of something to be saved, spent, lost, used, or wasted. This is a view that makes us feel as if time is getting away from us, that somehow time is passing and we have to keep up. Or maybe even that there's a schedule for our improvement and somehow we're falling behind and we should be better than we are by now. Music frees us from this tyrannical experience of time and brings us into a world of rhythms and cycles, of departure and return. We take satisfaction in the return of something familiar, and this is reflected in the pleasure we take when we hear of the return of music that we recognize. Music plays on this pleasure and brings it to our awareness. In some music, especially Mozart's, wall clock time fades, and we find ourselves suspended in time. The music brings us to stillness rather than moves us forward, because the sounds exist in a plane where motion is unnecessary. As we listen, we rise above our everyday self and become a different person, better than we normally are, more attuned to the world and belonging to it, rather than feeling that the world is rushing by and leaving us behind. Music, at its root, has three expressions: as dance, as lyric, and as procedure. We can identify these three expressions by the way we respond to the music. We respond to dance music with our body, lyric music with our heart, and procedure music with our mind. Dance music, whether it's the minuet, the mambo, or the macarena, gives us pleasure because of its regularity and predictability. Dance music moves our body, reflecting its need for coordination and balance. Music that keeps us upright and moving and prevents us from tripping on our feet or falling over. Lyric music, songs, or music that's song-like, gives us pleasure for its impulsiveness and unpredictability. Lyric music moves our heart, reflecting the need to express our ever-changing emotions and to explore our experience of those emotions. And procedure music music ordered using a pre-established formula, gives us pleasure for its playfulness and creativity. Procedure music moves our thought, reflecting the mind's need for coherence and reason, and expresses our inventiveness and resourcefulness. Composers combine these three kinds of music into larger works. One example of this is the sonata, in which 1, 2, or 3 of these musical expressions follow each other in separate sections called movements. The first movement of a sonata is procedure music, typically followed by a dance or lyric movement, or maybe both, and then ends with another procedure. The sonata that Mozart dictated to Mr. Diaghileval, however, is not a complete sonata, but has only one movement. This raises questions. What part of the sonata did Mozart give us? Why didn't he give us a whole sonata? And maybe more importantly, or the larger question, after leaving us with over 150 hours, that's 6 days, worth of music, why did he dictate this 5-minute movement of an incomplete sonata? The movement Mozart dictated is lyric music, music of the heart, one whose emotions are direct, balanced, and simple. Simple meaning direct, of course. Lyric music implies music that can be sung. We call the words in a song its lyrics, but music doesn't have to have words to be lyrical. The piece that Mozart dictated has no words. In his interview, Mozart said that he enjoys senses that we don't have, senses that allow him to hear all of nature as music. We rely on words to give us knowledge, but God's words are a special revelation of his presence. God most abundantly communicates himself to us through nature. Where words are concerned with communicating knowledge, Mozart's music is concerned with communicating beauty, the beauty of the created world as his senses allow him to see it. The particular kind of lyric movement that Mozart dictated is in the form of a da capo aria, something heard in the opera house. In a da capo aria, a melody is sung, followed by another melody, after which the first melody is sung again. Mozart was a man of the theater, and writing lyric music came naturally to him. Mozart said of himself, "I'm an opera composer who writes piano concertos for a living and chamber music for my friends." Sorry, I lost my place. In his operas, Mozart set words to music in two different ways. Recitative, the talking part of an opera that moves the action of the story forward, and arias, where the action of the story stops and the singer gives way to his feelings. In an aria, our attention switches from the action of the story to the emotions felt by one or more of the singers. In his sonatas, Mozart puts his compositional skill to greatest use in the first movement when our attention is sharpest. But this movement is not a first, but a middle movement. We can be confident calling it this because not one of the 19 sonatas Mozart wrote during his lifetime begins or ends with a lyric movement. And I have not come across any sonata by any composer that does so. At first, having a sonata with a middle movement is unsatisfying. We want to know what happens at the beginning and the end, because without these, a story or this sonata is not complete. So what are we to make of this sonata without a beginning or an end? And why give us a lyric movement? Lyric music is music of reflection, one that probes an emotion or an experience we've had. Like music, human experience is in time. We are on a journey between birth and death. And on this journey, we go through stages. And as we look back, we see our experiences from a different perspective. we experience this looking back in the present. So we not only see how it was, but also how it is and how it may continue to be. Part of our life is past and we're going somewhere. And we experience all this in the present. As we hold the past, the present, and the future together in a single insight, we have a profound human experience of our life as unified. In these moments, we can take pleasure in these experiences by seeing their beauty and by recognizing that everything is in its proper place, just as it should be. We may not be at a point now where we could see the true beauty in our life because we don't yet understand our experiences or how they change us. As humans, we're not given to know completely our beginning or our end. We are then living in the center of our existence, and we can sharpen our awareness of life's beauty so that we come to know God and ourselves better. With this middle movement, Mozart's music inspires us to take heart, to believe that we're in the middle of a journey of goodness, even though the beginning and the end are not clear. With this aria without words, Mozart's music pulls us back from the daily movement, from the forward movement of our daily existence, from our physical and mental activity, so that we can rest in the presence of our deeper self, experience the beauty of life, and taking pleasure in it. Let us listen again to this lyric music, this sonata without a beginning or an end. This time, listening to what Mozart has to say to each one of us and taking pleasure in the beauty of the life that we've been given.